Okay, get myself unmuted. So I don't look like anybody wants to show up on a Monday Zoom meeting, but I'll go over what I was going to go over today. Hopefully you're seeing it on YouTube. So this is going to cover the homework that was assigned. We're going to create a trigger and you insert data into the playlist table in the Chinook database. It will instead put it into another table first. Probably not a really great trigger to do, but we did notice our playlists have multiple playlists with the same name, different IDs, of course. So first thing we do, it says we need to create a table called verify playlist with the same column information as the playlist column. So SQL command to create table, table name, open up our parentheses, playlist ID, and it's integer. I noticed misspelling over there. I thought that was fixed earlier. Okay, talking to myself, sorry. And the name column, it is a variable character. If you look at the properties, variable character here on the name field, you'll see it's 120. Well, I say that. It's supposed to show 120. There we go. Just had to refresh. Length 120. That went through correct. Next thing, we'll actually create the trigger itself, or the trigger function, what's going to run if the conditions are met. So we hadn't created the condition yet, that's actual trigger itself. We're creating the trigger function, so all the code that will fire off if the trigger is pulled. And we want to, instead of putting data into the playlist table on an insert, we want to put it into the verify playlist table first. So the way Postgres does it, other than the way the book described it, I typically use a create function, and we create a function to run code. So I told you to name it check playlist as the function name. And functions always have to return. What does it return? A trigger. As we described the other day, you have to trigger function is returns trigger. We'll open up our variable and we'll have our begin and our end. That will be the statement block of SQL between those. I'm going to go ahead and end out the $, and I'm going to go ahead and specify the language. Of procedural logic, Postgres, SQL. So this is the structure of a typical function. Now I've got to write the SQL code here in between the beginning and ending. So I said I want the data to be put into another table. Well, putting data into a table is insert into. That is your SQL command. And you insert into what? The table name. Verify playlist. Followed by the column names. Not required, but it's good to have them in the right order. It's easier for people looking at your code in the future to know what's going on. values and these values. So if you're dealing with insert data, insert's dealing with new. You won't have any old data. You're putting new data into the table. So we want to take the new data from the playlist ID and the new data from the name and put that into the verify playlist table. So if we issue an insert statement on the playlist table, a trigger will fire, this function will run, and that new data designated by the new period in front of these column names, that new data being passed into this function will instead be put into the verify underscore playlist table. Like I said, in practicality, this trigger wouldn't really be good because you could never put new information in the playlist. You would always fire the trigger and place it into the other table. And this needs to return something. And what do we want to return? In the other video, I said you could return new information, which is all we have. You could return old. We don't have any old information. And this is the stuff that's being returned back to the calling statement. So once issue an insert into the playlist table, I don't want it to actually be put in the playlist. So if I want it to remain blank, I need to return null. If I return new, then it would put data into the playlist table and the verify playlist table. If I want to return null, it's going to run this statement and any values that were going to be passed back to the original statement, it would return nothing. So the insert would not insert anything into playlist. I'm going to go ahead and run this selection and see if I have any errors. I got the semicolons in the right spots. So that succeeded. We created a function. So there's my verify playlist created. I've got a new check playlist isn't showing up yet. Said it went in there. Maybe just something with the refresh going on. Once the functions, now we got to actually create the trigger itself. What happens when you insert? So this here is fairly close to what the book has. We'll do a create trigger and give it a name. I just said CK underscore play. So check playlist is what that's abbreviated for. And I want to do a before. I don't want the insert to happen. So before the insert happens, so before insert, and I'm going to attach it to the table. That'd be the playlist table. Before I insert anything on the playlist, I want it to fire the trigger. I want it to fire the trigger for each row that is trying to be inserted. So each new row for each row, I want to execute procedure. I know it's weird. It should have been execute function, but execute procedure, and I want to run the check playlist function. Execute that. And I have an error. Why do I have an error? Type ticker does not exist. Where did I? Spell the return type. Okay, fix that. Now execute that selection. There's lots of typos there. That's probably why the function didn't show up. Now we've got a function created. Troubleshooting. You have to troubleshoot. Okay, now that is successful too. So trigger has been created after some spelling stuff. Now in the homework, I told you that you would do a select everything from the verify playlist table. And you'd also want to do select everything from playlist. So go ahead and run that part. That table is empty. I think I'll lock the server up. So I'm going to go restart the server. And close the connection and reopen it. After I did the restart, let's try to execute this again. Okay, there we go. I got the playlist in there. It's going a little bit too fast. So we've seen there was nothing in verify playlist. We see 18 is the highest number. So if I try to insert data into playlist, I use 999 as the example, and testing as the name. So I'll execute this insert. It runs. It first hits this trigger before insert on the playlist table. It executes this procedure. The procedure comes up and runs, and it runs insert into verify playlist, and it takes that new information, that 999, and testing, and puts it into the verify playlist columns, it returns nothing back. It does not return the 999 or the testing name back to this statement. So this statement will have null in those two columns when it's returned, and it will not insert anything into the playlist table. Let's go ahead and double check the playlist table itself. I notice there's not a 999 row. I've still only got 18. If I execute the verify playlist table, I see that it was placed into there instead of the playlist table itself. Like I said, that probably would not be extremely useful because now we don't ever have the ability to put anything into playlist unless we delete the trigger and then put stuff into there. But it was just an example. Get used to creating functions from last chapter and triggers from this chapter. Okay, so I don't have anybody in the Zoom meeting to ask more questions. So I'll switch over to the web browser. And in here, our classes has a test for Wednesday. So I'll have out there the password out to the side of it. And that way you can take it. And I will also, hopefully by Wednesday, I'll have another assignment to be due on Friday, and it will be dealing with an update statement. That way we can update a table and deal with both new and old data for a trigger. So you'll have to create a new function and you'll deal with new and old data with an update statement. And as far as this video goes, it looks like we'll let you do the quiz on Wednesday, and you should have that assignment for Friday. We'll also do a Friday Zoom meeting to talk about the final and about the Postgres trigger for update, dealing with new and old data. Hopefully somebody will show up for the Zoom meeting. But Wednesday will just be test day, so we'll not meet for that day on Zoom. Okay, since nobody's here to ask any more questions, for me to point out anything, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.